Hey, what's up everybody? This is Joshua Casper. I'm here with Plugin Boutique. Today we're taking a look at the U73b Compressor by Audified. Very straightforward compressor. It's meant to faithfully emulate an old school hardware compressor, and it's got a few upgrades for the VST Virtual Instruments style version. First things first, when I loaded the plugin for the first time, everything was in German, and that's not really my thing because I don't speak German. And if that happened to you and you want to change it back to English, you just come over here to the settings and you can choose the UI language here from German to English. Another thing to think about while you're inside of here is oversampling, and this is going to give you a higher sample rate than is set inside of your DAW, which is going to give you better results at the cost of CPU. Again, something to think about. And another update to the virtual version of this plugin is the ability to turn the high pass filter off and on. You couldn't do that with the hardware version. The high pass filter is around 100 hertz and it's a 6 dB curve. So if you're running this on, a vocal track, or if you're running this on a guitar track, using the high pass filter is a good thing. But if you're using this as a master compressor or on your drums and maybe your bass, then you probably don't want to have that on. Pretty straightforward parameters here, on and off switch. The calibration has to do with circuitry voltages, and I suggest just leaving it at -9 because that's what the manual suggested. Unless you want to get in and get experimental and kind of figure things out for yourself, then you can move that around. But for me, I'm just going to leave it at 9 for the sake of the tutorial here. Then we have the compressor or limiter modes. Bypass is obviously neither. The compressor mode has a slight threshold with a gentle boost ratio, and the limiter has a much more aggressive ratio with a much higher threshold. So depending on what you're trying to do here, obviously limiter might be good on the master bus and compressor might be good on individual channels. The release, you've got 6 different release settings here. The first 3 are fixed release times, and these 3 with the red have to do with the settings of the compressor itself, and it will kind of adjust things based on the other settings. And over here we've got the input and the output gains, which are pretty straightforward, though there is this auto gain feature, which if you turn it on and adjust the input gain, let's say I increase the input gain, the output gain will reduce, so the overall output will stay about the same, and it will just affect how much of the compression happens. So if I really crank up the input here, the dynamics will be a little bit more crushed, though the output will decrease. So I notice the effect of the compressor more than just things getting really loud and sounding really good, which I think is very useful, especially when you're doing slight tweaks to stuff. There's also the ability to change what is being displayed on the meter here from the input signal and the output signal. The one strange thing about this knob is you click and drag right and left, as opposed to everything else is click and drag up and down to switch. Okay, so now we're going to actually get into some audio examples. And what I've done here is duplicated the same project. One has 3 instances of the compressor on it, has an instance on the drum group, the bass, and the Vox channels. And the second instance doesn't have any of those compressors on any of the tracks. I also adjusted the overall output volume of each of the examples so they're relatively the same, so we can get a better understanding of what the compressor is actually doing. So let's go ahead and listen. Okay, so what I hear is a tighter ensemble. I hear everything seems like it's in its own place in the versions with the compressors already added. The versions without the compressors, everything sounds a little bit more muffled, a little bit more muddy. So I really like what it's done. So the next thing we can do is check out each individual section to see what effect the compressor is having. So this is the drum group without the compressor. And now with the compressor. So obviously there's a lot of tightening up going on in there, and there's also a gentle gain boost. Here is the bass. So again, it's really tightening up that bass, that subby low end, but it's also really bringing out the character of that mid-range. The mid-range is more apparent. It sounds nicer. It sounds more natural. It sounds less muffled and muddy than the original without the compressor. So the last thing we're going to check out is the acapella here, which is just kind of this loop.
Binding up the booty. Binding up the booty. Binding up the booty. Binding.
So again, much tighter. Another thing you can really notice is how tight the reverb tail is, or the little delay signal. The compressor is really tightening that up and making it sound like an actual element as opposed to just an effect from some previous processing.
Binding up the booty. Binding up the booty.
So I really like the character it adds to that little bit of reverb there on that vocal. So those are just some examples of the U73b compressor in action. I hope you learned something. We'll see you next time.